Hello and welcome to another Shared Screens review. We are talking all things The Last of Us Part 1 for the PS5. Joining me as part of Shared Screens, we have Jim Tasty, Brett Jamerson himself. How you doing?
Good, man. I'm excited to talk about this game.
Talk about The Last of Us. Let's get it. Joel and Ellie. And then also joining us, Jordan. How you doing, Jordan?
You don't know what loss is. I'm doing good.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
You have the impression? On the ones and twos, we have Alec Bobco. How you doing, Alec?
Yeah, doing all right today. I had some car issues this morning, so
I saw that, yeah.
fingers crossed that it's not going to be expensive. But you know, when there's a blinking check engine light, I don't have my hopes up too high.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's not how I would want to start my morning either. I mean, at least you don't live in the universe of The Last of Us. That's probably a worse morning if I had
Very
to.
true. Very true.
If I had to compare the two.
Yeah.
All right, so we're talking all things The Last of Us. As a companion piece to this podcast length review, we will be having a TikTok, a reel, a short, everywhere else. Go give those a look. Go give them a like. Do all the fun stuff. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe on all that fun stuff. We gotta pimp our stuff when we can. We gotta grow. And these reviews, these critical reviews, we're pushing them. All things Last of Us. I did want to start by at the top by saying this is going to be an unscored review. Usually when we review something, we give it a solid thing. It's on a 20-point scale, like a 7 or an 8 or a 8.5 out of 10. This, with the status of this game, the way it is, being a remake and all, of a game that came out not even 10 years ago, we're not going to score this game. We're going to give it the entire review treatment. We're going to talk about it like we would any other game, essentially, but more technical kind of focus, but we're going to give it the same review treatment, just not going to give it a score. We're going to leave it unscored. So I'm going to hand it over to our guests, Brett and Jordan. I'm going to start with Brett, because you have a little bit more time in it. You've been playing on hardcore or whatever it's called, Grounded?
Grounded, yeah.
Grounded, because you're a maniac. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so your overall, just kind of like bullet point thoughts on The Last of Us remake.
So just to give some like prerequisites, I've only played this once, or like the game, like the original or the remastered, because it already got kind of a remaster before. So I've only played it once, and I played it in 2020. So I'm still like a newer fan to this franchise. Story still hit me like, you know, a bag of bricks, like incredible. Yeah, I think my general thoughts on this game are the graphical upgrade, I think, is actually underrated. Like, people don't talk about it enough. Like, obviously it's better graphics, but like if you really compare it to the PS4 remaster or even the original, even part 2, like this is just such another level up with how good it looks. And then I think it's not talked enough about like the smaller details that they changed, like some of the gunplay, some of the like the camera shot when you're, you know, in combat, some of the AI changes, stuff like that. I think doesn't get talked about enough because it's not like something sexy to talk about or show. But I mean, it's easily the definitive version of this game. Yeah. Easy.
The exact words that I used in our short review that you need to go watch. Go watch it right now.
Mm-hmm.
It should be up at the time this goes up. But yes, the definitive version. There's no question. Like, I mean, I feel like that's a given when you remake a game. Like, not even 10 years later, but still, it's still a remake. It's going to be the definitive version. But I feel like going into this, people were just like, oh, it's just going to be an up-res essentially version. It's just going to be the exact same game, which it is. But there's not going to be enough substance to buy it. And we'll get into the price later because I do have a small qualms with the price. But I do think that I'm genuinely surprised by how much the lighting work just like altered my experience of this game.
Yeah.
Like, there's something about the realism that the remake brings, and the lighting does a lot of heavy work in my opinion. There's something about the realism in this game that it makes the things you're doing that much more visceral, and like it gives them more weight. The verbiage I use, everything about this game is the exact same game, but somehow every aspect has more weight to it. Every action you're taking just feels more genuine and awful in a way. You're just like, all right, well, I'm doing this, and it's terrifying at times when you're like in a dark corridor and you hear the clicker or whatever, and you're like, I didn't see you a second ago. Where the fuck did you come from? And you're like, all right, cool. Yeah, Jordan, your bullet point thoughts on The Last of Us.
Yeah, so I'm really early into it. I was away this weekend, so I just started the game today. I'm in Bill's town, but I haven't like seen Bill yet to kind of pinpoint where I am. And like kind of like you guys are saying, it is The Last of Us. I knew this would be the definitive version of the game, kind of like how the 2018 Shadow of the Colossus is like the definitive Shadow of the Colossus. There's really no reason to play like the PS2 version of that game. There's really no reason if it's your first time playing it or to play the Last of Us remastered, unless it's like, everybody's money situation is different. Last of Us remastered's on the PlayStation Plus collection. I get that. Um, as for me, this is my second time playing through The Last of Us Part 1. I played through remastered in 2016, so like I didn't play it right when it came out, but I managed for it to not ever get spoiled for me. And it was before, I know Last of Us Part 2 was announced 2016, but this was like even before that. So it was kind of when it was everybody was just like, this is the game you have to play. And I knew that. I just held in my pocket for when I had a chance to marathon it. Um and I can't tell. I have conflicting feelings about the fact that it's a 1-to-1 remake. I'm trying to like kind of deal with it in my head where I I completely get why they didn't really do other changes, because it's like if you wanted to adapt 100%, let's say the combat from part 2, you have to now change the level design to fit that combat. But I kind of wish that the combat that Joel has at least kind of flowed the way parts 2 does, but I also might not have enough guns and ammo yet to make it flow the way I did in part 2. So like I'm willing to like hold off on that one.
Me personally, it felt like a half step towards that way. Just like it was just like the movement speed to me felt different, but it's also been a long time since I played the OG, so that could just be me. But Joel felt faster to me, and I don't know if that was just me remembering playing as Ellie, which clearly would be like a quicker, more spry character.
Yeah.
But Joel felt like this version of Joel
Or
felt
maybe
like a
it's
half
the
step
FPS.
between the the original and this one. But yes, so go
Yeah.
on.
And so I'm trying to juggle everything in my head of like, they could have, if they wanted to, they could have gotten really obnoxious with this being like a remake where like, oh, they probably could have had, Future Days playing on the radio when Joel walks into the house in the opening scene. And that changes nothing continuity wise, but they're like, you know why we put this in. We know you fuckers are crying on the couch right now. And it's also I also think that's the reason why they couldn't really give you even one level. I think the biggest issue that people are going to have with this game is that rumors originally said that there was going to be an expansive aspect to it, that there was going to be kind of how we got that open section in part 2 when you get to go to all the stores and look for, I think it's the gasoline or the generator. People like, I think original rumors said that something like that was going to be added to one of these levels. And so I think that's what's going to hurt people, is finding out that it isn't. But I also get why they don't re-record lines and they don't add to the levels, because as hard as you try, you are now getting into an issue where, well, which version is canon?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And it's one of those things where you could put Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson in a booth today and give them all the lines they read back in 2012 when the game was being developed. As hard as they try, those lines are not going to come out the same way. It's kind of like something that people talk about, like why watching theater is like different than watching a movie is. If you go to the same Broadway show every night, some of those lines are going to be said differently because you can't get yourself to physically say it that same way 100% of the time. So them using the old recordings and keeping the level design the same, I get, but I am kind of like looking at it being like, I wish it had a little something. Now, Brett's saying, if you compare it, they look drastically different. And I agree. When I see the screenshots side by side, they are two different games. It's just one of those things where without the screenshot next to me to compare, I'm just going, this is how I remember The Last of Us, because games always look better in your memories.
Totally. No, I totally agree with that
Like
sentiment.
if I think of playing like one of the PS2 Ratchet games, I'm probably like, it's like what, 2 steps below like the PS4 version. And then I turn it on, I'm like, oh, like he is a square. Like that man is made of triangles.
Totally.
Yeah.
So, Jordan, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Take everything you just said. They made it $30. Does that change your opinion?
See, that's the other thing I'm arguing with myself
See?
with. So let me explain.
Fine.
And it's like if you're developing a completely original game, new characters, new world, like a brand new IP, the game development isn't just the people at the computer drawing the models and animating them and making sure that nobody's falling through the floor and stuff. There is level design, there is pre-production and concept art of like, Ellie and Joel back in let's say 2009 probably had 100 different iterations of them being drawn before they settled on the versions that we got. And so you kind of have to account for that in when you're making a game, because that does take time and money. But at the same time, and from what I'm not a game dev, and like I try my best to understand game dev, but it's one of those things that I think if you're not there, you don't fully get. But somebody who has been in game dev, specifically Andy Cortez, was like, they're probably reusing the flashback models from part 2. But then I go, well, I expect God of War Ragnarok to be $70, and they're definitely reusing Kratos' model, maybe not Atreus because he's older now. And so I'm trying to find the line of like,
We're using that boat thing too. The cinematic.
How
for
dare
the
they?
boat. How dare they? My
lazy
God.
dev. That's the thing. It's like I don't want to be like, oh, they're reusing these models they make, because like, to be fair, good for them, man. They probably spent how long on those models to be used in one flashback sequence? Like, I
Sure.
get why they're using them. But you also don't have, like I said, they're reusing the voice line. So like, I'm sure they had to pay the voice actor something for like a reuse or royalty fees, but you're not doing that again. The writing really isn't there. So in some aspects, they're not doing the work that would account for game dev. But from the strictly technical level, yeah, they went back in, they made all these models. They basically looked at the PS3 game and one for one remade it in, I'm assuming, a new engine or a better engine. Not like GTA, the Trilogy Definitive Edition, where AI came in and made all the like models have double the polygons.
Right.
Like this
Yeah,
is
I don't want to get into necessarily like the game devs not putting in the work. I know that's not what you're saying. I know that.
yeah, that's not what I'm
just
saying.
I think it's a different. It's meticulous in a different way, is how I look at it. Like because they're using a bunch of the same models, but they're doing creative differences that they wouldn't do, or creative techniques that they wouldn't have done like they weren't even capable of doing on the first game.
Like
So it's not like
yeah, I try to
Go on.
like I'm trying to think of like games that have been a reduced price and why they were, and like 3 games come to mind. Ratchet and Clank Quest for Booty, that was like a 3-hour experience, download only game. So that was like, I think $20 when it came out on the PS3. Ratchet and Clank Remake on the PS4, that one, that was a completely original game because you're jumping 2 generations in between. You're going from, composite standard definition to now 3D models in HD. And it also was a new story. I mean, it was the story of the Ratchet and Clank movie, but it was a new story game for game. But that one, I believe, was 40 when it came out in 2016. And then you have Miles Morales, which I think is one of the most interesting kind of ones to compare this to, because yes, Miles Morales was shorter. Yes, Miles Morales is a different character who had different powers, so they had to adapt those both from a concept standpoint and a gameplay standpoint. But the biggest part of the game, the map, is the exact same map from Marvel Spider-Man, but they were like, let's put snow this time.
Okay.
But most of the time when the justification for that price came, Insomniac and Sony were like, well, it's a smaller experience. Whereas I don't think Last of Us Part 1 is drastically smaller than Part 2. It's hard to compare linear games to open world when it comes to length. But yeah, the
I
price
remember
thing
part
is
2
interesting.
being a lot longer, but that could be me.
Yeah, it's longer.
I think Part 2 feels a lot longer, but like I still don't think the game is like this one's about 14 hours. I could be wrong. My estimate is that Part 2 is what, 20, maybe 25.
Looking it up right now.
I can do that while you guys keep talking.
Okay, I beat the game. This remake. I beat it in because I said when we were discussing before recording a while ago that usually if a game says it'll take 14 hours to beat, it takes me like 15 and a half. Like usually that's just how I am. I beat this game in like 12 and a half hours, which is very unlike me, and I don't know what the reason is for that.
Were you playing on an easier difficulty? And that's not me knocking people out who play different
That could
difficulties.
be it, but then again, because I always play on like not the easiest, but like whatever.
I
is,
usually
like,
play on like average or medium.
Yeah, that's usually what I go for. But I lost my train of thought now. Damn
my
it,
bad.
Jordan.
You're talking about the game length?
You said that you beat it
Yeah.
within 12.
Yeah, but it's just very unlike me, and I don't know what the reason is for that. And maybe because I knew what I was doing, because like I've played this game before. Because there were a lot of things where I'm like, I played this a long time ago. I'm not gonna remember anything, and that was totally not true. Like I know like the story beat, sure, but I meant like in the midst of gameplay and firefights, like where are these people gonna come from? What do I have to do next?
Yeah,
but I
like,
totally
right
did
now-
remember certain things.
Like I remember the story element of going to Bill's town the first time I played the game. I did not remember that there was a shed before you go to his town that has like 2 clickers in it. Like I don't remember that level of
Sure.
detail.
I remember like leading up to the scene where you get turned upside down, because in the original that drove me fucking nuts for some reason, because I could not aim to save my life. During that part, I turned on auto aim because I was like, "Fuck it." I didn't even try it yet. I was just like, "I'm turning on auto aim. I don't care. I'm not dealing with this again." So yeah,
Yeah, we didn't even talk about the accessibility.
I was going to get there.
Additions.
It's
Yeah.
in my notes. It's
Yes,
in my notes.
and
real
that
quick.
is
Since we want to talk about. Okay, go ahead, Alec.
So on howlongtobeat.com, The Last of Us main story is 15 hours, main plus extra is 17 and a half. Last of Us Part 2 main story is 24 hours, main and extra is 29 and a half.
It sounds about right. Yeah.
so about
yes.
10 hours more.
In my mind, that is significantly longer. Like I think that
Yeah, yeah,
qualifies
it's like
as the
30,
significant.
40%. Yeah, something like
Yeah.
that.
I agree. But yes, accessibility. Let's talk about it. Like right at the top, Naughty Dog keeps killing the game with accessibility. Like I remember in part 2, they had right before you do literally anything else, which I know like most games do that at the top where you have to like choose some settings and stuff. But Naughty Dog takes it to another level. Like they have a bunch of options for hard of hearing folks. They have permadeath. They have auto aim, like I brought up. Like a whole array of options.
Yeah.
Do you have anything more to add to that?
Yeah, so yeah, I'm very fortunate enough to be like fully abled and everything like that. But even for me, with all the accessibility, I was like, yeah, I want subtitles on. I want to have a color coding for the character talking so that I can just easily distinguish with like red, blue, yellow. And then, yeah, for the actual text, color coding as well. And then the arrow pointing where they're at, because sometimes they'll talk before the cutscene is, and it just helps me reorient where they're at in the space. So that alone for me was just such an awesome little feature that was in part 2. And yeah, just all the accessibility, man, just allowing more people to play this game. It's a defining game of this genre, of this medium, and so yeah, I mean it's awesome, and I can't wait to see how they expand on this stuff going forward.
Totally agree. Hats off to
And
Naughty
real
Dog.
quick,
Like, I'm always impressed by that.
One other feature, I don't know if it's an accessibility feature, but one thing I thought was really cool was because of the DualSense. When they're talking, I don't know if you guys turn this feature on, but when they're talking, you can have the controller vibrate, and it like kind of helps convey the tone or like the distance, how far away they are.
I
from
saw
you.
that. I think I want to
Oh.
turn that on at some point, but I also felt like that could personally, I if somebody wants, that's a really cool feature. I think for me personally, the way my mind works, like that might distract me a little too much.
See,
But
Yeah.
I
it
do
was
want to
at
try
first. It was at first, but you just get used to it, and it's just that more immersive, like because that's just what sound is vibration. So it's just you just kind of get used to it after a while. It was really cool.
I'll give it a shot.
I
But
think
yeah,
we
no,
should.
the accessibility stuff that Naughty Dog's done since part 2, like it cannot really be overstated. Like not just how good it is, but how much of a like how they're kind of pioneering
Set a new
accessibility in games in some ways, where like the high contrast mode I think was something that no game has really ever done. And it's fantastic for accessibility. And then you also have people that were fully able-bodied being like, I'm using this to make sure I don't miss anything. So something like that was reworked for the ground up. I mean, yes, I know they had it in part 2, but a completely new way to play this game and a completely new way to offer this game to people who maybe couldn't play the original version. Because I was also just kind of digging through the accessibility settings, and like a lot of games on console don't do this. This one lets you remap every single control.
Sure.
Yeah. And I haven't played part 2 since like it originally came out, so I know it's had updates since. I don't even think that was an option in part 2. Because again, that's just very rare for console games to have full key binding.
Oh yeah, I want to say it was in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, the control, I was just like, I remember I started up, I was like, wait, how do I sprint? I was like clicking the sticks, I was like pressing X,
Yeah.
like, oh, L1. I was like, that's Naughty
Yeah,
Dog,
I
man.
really wish they told. I really wish they told you the sprint button in the prologue and
Well,
not after the time jump.
so yeah, I'm playing on grounded, so I get no tutorials or anything. So I was like,
You playing grounded with permadeath?
no, I'm not that tough.
He's a maniac. He's not, second level maniac. He's
It
not
was like,
insane.
yeah,
Come
it
on.
was
He's
like
never been masochist.
you can do permadeath, act, and chapter. And I was like, I'm just gonna do it grounded, and I'll just do normal checkpoints because there was definitely parts where I was stuck at like a combat zero for like an hour or whatever. So
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, and piggybacking off the combat, like in the first game, when I originally played the first game, I think I played it. The game came out in 2013, correct? Like
Yes.
its original release. I think I played it in 2014. Like I wasn't racing to play it. I don't know. It wasn't for me at the time. I don't remember why. I just never got around to it. I think it was because I was graduating soon and just stuff.
End of the
I don't know.
generation. Yeah, it's
Yeah, it could be.
weird.
Anyway, when I did get around to playing it, I remember being like, about the entire game. Like I played it and my experience was, yep, that was a game. Had a cool twist at the end. I like that. That was cool. Joel's a cool character. That's all I took away from this game because most of my gripes were the gameplay. I suck at shooters. Okay, I mean this is a shooter, but it's more just like running for your life, essentially. I mean that's how I play because I suck. So maybe that's just a me thing. But I think the gameplay in the original it felt like a half step. I keep saying half step, somewhere in between Resident Evil and something else, and I don't know what it was. But here it feels more so like I'm actually in control. And in the times when I felt like I didn't, like when I was upside down for some reason that fucks with my brain, I turned on auto aim and that helped and I got through it. And here we are. So I think that's even more hats off to the accessibility options. But I think the main thing I'm trying to get at is the fact that the gameplay never slowed me down in playing it this time around. And again, it could be because I've played this game before. It could be because I felt familiar with it. But this experience, like if we're taking like just the technical advancements, like it looking pretty off the table, for me, just the gameplay and mechanics alone, this is a better experience than the first one. Duh.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
I just think there's more to it than that is what I'm getting at. There's
I-
something
Yeah.
about how they retool things. I feel like it flows better in combat.
I
Yeah,
think oh, go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, I brought it up at the beginning, but like, because when this game came out, I watched like all the Digital Foundry stuff that they did, and they broke all this stuff down, and like even down to like the shooting mechanics, like even animations of like shooting was like kind of stilted in the original / remastered. And then in this version of the game, it's much more like The Last of Us Part 2, where it's like a full animation of like cocking the gun, hitting the shoulder, all that animation. And that translates to like what you're saying, Austin, like with movement, ducking, melee combat. It just all, and it's one of those things like that you said, Jordan, it's like it's hard to notice in the moment. But if you watch the side by side comparison stuff, like it is just night and day.
Yeah,
totally.
Like,
Totally agree. And I did have real quick, Jordan. I
yeah.
did have a few moments where like I something felt a tiny bit off, where like I was trying to crouch and like trying to hit someone, and like it didn't work right. But I always if that only happens a few times, that's on me because I just panic. I panic and I'm like, shit. I'm just mashing buttons. I'm just trying to hit them a bunch of times.
Before
for
I like
that one last
sprinted
clicker.
towards a soldier and like was like, I'm gonna do melee, and I was like 4 feet in front of him and I just punched the air, and that's completely on my own depth perception.
Sure.
yeah.
My favorite, like early game, my favorite thing to do is to take a brick and just fucking pummel people with it. I wouldn't even throw it.
Oh.
I would just pick up a brick
here's
and
the
just
thing. But I remember doing that in part 2 as well, but that kind of helping with the flow of combat. Do you guys remember that like when part 2 came out, there was like this Twitter account that was just posting how good he was at the combat and like all these fight scenes? I remember yeah, he's done it with a bunch of other games, but I specifically remember it like blowing up around part 2. And I think what it is like when you say it feels like a half step, and I think that goes back to like me juggling in my head, this being a 1-for-1 remake, but I wish they did more because the gunplay, the gameplay, the shooting, like from what I'm doing on the controller to what's happening on screen, that does feel very good. Probably better than it did with remastered. But the combat design or the level design is still PS3 era, or even if you want to say early PS2 or early PS4 era, because of, how transformative Last of Us was, and it was kind of between console generations. That is still there. So like you guys heard me make this comparison earlier this year when I was talking about like my experience with Mass Effect, where I'm like playing Legendary Edition is I can tell I'm playing like a really good PS3 game, and Andromeda is like playing an all right PS4 game in terms of just like the gameplay feel. This has that where the shooting feels good, the way I'm moving feels good, but the encounters still feel a little bit like rough around the edges in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't like. I keep caveating this because again, I've played this game before, so I never felt that, but it might just have been the familiarity with the game because like I know what I need to do next, blah blah blah, and I feel like something about around the edges for like encounters and the way things are structured, something about games with suspense and you could find anything around the corner. I think that works with that kind of game. Does that make sense? Like sometimes when you're like corridoring a character through something, when you're kind of creeping around corners and in a dark corridor or whatever, like for some reason that doesn't hit me as hard. Like I think it's okay. Not it's okay. That's not putting it well. But you understand what I'm getting at, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's like smaller stuff. Like this is such a dumb thing to complain about, and I'm not using this as a knock against the game. I want to make this very clear. But something that I've already noticed that's like stuck out is the animation when you're doing a stealth kill. Every single person is doing the same animation. They're hitting you from the side, like their arms move the exact same way. And again, does that really take me out of the game? Does that make this game a bad game? No, it's the fucking Last of Us. Like it's a fantastic game.
I would
But
argue
it's
most of the time I'm not looking at the guy's hand. I'm looking at where am I going next. Like fuck, I don't give a shit.
fair.
I'm not looking at that guy.
maybe I gotta get good. But it is one of those things where you go like, oh, this feels like just a tad bit older because I'm sure I'm not saying part two never reused animations or assets, but there probably was some level of part two you had the wolves and then you had the scars, and they each fought very differently. And so you got that mix probably of different animation styles or fighting sequences depending on who you were with.
And here the only difference you get are humans and clickers, essentially.
Yeah, but like clickers you still do that's what I'm saying. The soldiers, the runners, and the clickers so far have all done that same animation.
Sure. I'm just saying the only difference in like moment-to-moment gameplay, like fighting A and fighting B would be clickers to humans, essentially.
Exactly, yeah.
And this time around, I enjoyed fighting bloaters. Maybe that's different when you're playing on a really hard difficulty, but for me, I was like, "Yay, a bloater!" And I would just like sprint that down. I would kill everyone else
like
first.
After you beat the Rat King, you can a bloater's no big deal.
Yeah.
The Rat King is no joke.
For
I
me,
loved that moment.
The bloater, yeah, it wasn't that bad. Like I enjoyed it as well. Maybe because I had already played it even just once, but
sure. But
knew
I remember
what to do.
The first time through facing bloaters, I was like, "Fuck this guy!" But for some reason, this time around, I'm like, "Yeah, bloaters! Like, let's go!" I don't know.
So
something
I haven't gotten to them yet, but I heard from Kind of Funny's review that they brought the stalkers from part 2 into part 1.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, thank you.
Yeah. So I heard that too. That I guess the stalkers were always in part 1, but it's like
Yes,
they were completely redesigned for part 2, and like I'm excited to get to that part because that is gonna be like, oh, that's gonna be fresh. They took the part 2 style of the stalkers, not just the like the physical style, like how they work and stuff, and applied it now to the level design of part 1. So that's gonna be something interesting to see.
Back in 2013, the way they really wanted it to, because I guess from what they were saying that they're basically just, or in the original game they're basically just like crazy or bigger, like stronger runners, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Sure. There are 3 things I do want to touch on before I forget, and I want to save the pricing for last. But I want to touch on the weight that the game offers one more time. There was a scene. There's a few things I want to talk about where the weight, and by the weight I mean like just how pretty it looks, the lighting. I think that adds a bit of. It makes the visceral actions you're doing just that much more. They feel real. They feel genuine. They feel more like impactful, if that makes sense. There's a scene where I don't remember seeing this in the first one. I can't confirm or deny if it's in the first one, but where the other boy, the African American boy, what's his name?
I know there's Sam and Henry. I forget who is who.
Sam. I think it's Sam.
Sam.
It's Sam and Ellie. They just stop and start playing darts at this random location. And I was running through looking for shit, and I see them doing it, and I just stop. I just watch them play darts. It only lasts like maybe 20 seconds, but I was like, in the first game, I would have never given two shits about this. 'Cause like, I mean, at the time, sure, we're like, oh, this looks great, but I know for a fact that like when I was playing games around then and trying to take in everything the game was offering, because they couldn't complete their vision, 2013 version, that wouldn't have been a moment for me. Just by nature of like what the PS3 was and them making this game. But now it was like I literally just stopped everything I was doing and just watched them play darts.
Yeah.
And then I think if I remember correctly, I don't remember who won, but whoever lost got butthurt. And I was like, yes, like you're being kids in this moment in this terrible universe, and I'm all about this.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on? Were there any moments like that for you where you're like,
So
okay, go on.
that does bring us. I do feel like part of my. How do you guys feel playing the beginning of this game post 2020?
Oh, that's my other. I literally have a note. I'll just read you the note. It's not very long.
Okay.
The opening is only improved. God damn. That's my note.
See,
It's for
part of me is like, oh, it's improved, but then part of me goes, oh,
You can
I'm
disagree.
not-
That's okay.
It's not that I disagree, but part of me goes, oh, this feels like some fucking like right-wing COVID propaganda of like, do you know what's gonna happen if we let the fear of this virus affect us? And I'm not saying that, you know, COVID is like the cordyceps virus or anything, but it is one of those things where it's like, oh, they truly ended up going into martial law. Like people are being shot on site. I'm not saying I agree with that even for this virus, but it is one of those things where it's like this feels like it's propaganda, and I know it's not. But
Yeah,
it,
I
it
think
just,
I think you've just been conditioned by real world events.
I think I'm just so fucking jaded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Where I'm like,
I get
someone's
that.
gonna take like the cutscene of this game and be like, this is what the government secretly wants from us.
Damn it. To quote Janet, the government killed her, not the zombie apocalypse or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't remember this in the first one. It probably was in the first one. I can almost confirm it was because the voice lines. But I don't remember the guy being like, "But sir, there's a child." Like I don't remember that. I
It's
remember
in
him.
there.
I feel like I
Again, I'm
remember
not saying
that.
it's not. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying here it stood out. And I was like, "Oh shit!" Like he doesn't even want to do it, but he's just like, "Fuck!" Like I guess I have to. Like this fucking sucks.
Yeah, maybe
See
they
the
like,
bad
boosted
guy?
the
I don't
audio or
know.
something.
Well, and somewhat related to that, I feel like I'm also realizing like little disconnects between part 1 and part 2 where like I know part 1 had like the throwaway line when they get to Seattle of like um what's it called, Fedra like did nothing and like the quarantine zone didn't work. But is Boston the only still active quarantine zone in the country? Because like you have Jackson, you have the Wolves, you have the Scars, you have the people in San Francisco, you get everybody that you meet on this journey, and then you get reference to Fedra failing in Seattle, but you never see another quarantine zone. So it's like this is basically just another community. It's just a community that's chose to pretend like the government's still around. Or I'm a big lore person, so like I tend to notice these type of things where like I'd love a Last of Us anthology game or even television series that has nothing to do with Joel and Ellie and just gives us more stories in this universe.
Have you guys read the American Dreams comic? I don't know if that goes into it, but
I have not.
just my assumption is that based on this world, and yeah, there's some that have failed, but there's still some that are going around. I would imagine, 50 capital cities, or I guess 48 just continental, but like out of that many, in other major cities, let's say there's 100 major city quarantine zones. At that point in the story, there's probably like 20 something left that are
Maybe,
still
yeah.
active.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of them probably went to shit, like with Seattle when the guys kind of got power hungry and stuff.
Yeah. It's just one of those things that like I didn't think of around part 2 because I hadn't played the game in 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, you imagine those people who were like working for the government at that point. Shit hits the fan. They just survive at that point. They're just
Mhm.
they're just out there now. They're just started their own little group.
Yeah.
In the original, my least favorite aspect was the David fight. Have any of you got to the David fight in the remake? I know Jordan hasn't. Brett, have you got to the David fight?
No, so I literally just got to Pittsburgh, so I'm about
Okay.
what 20% in, 25% in. So,
Okay.
so got
The
a ways to go.
David fight still sucks for some reason. And
They changed it, right? They changed it a little bit.
it is a little different, but I still had a very similar issue where I died one time, I respawn, and he's just right there, and there's nothing I can do. And this
Mhm.
happened 8 to 10 times in a row.
Because you can't attack him, right? Like it has to be a stealth mission.
It
Like
has to
that's
be
the
a
way they
stealth
want you to
thing.
play. That's like how they
Mhm.
want you to play the boss fight. Yeah.
But I don't know if it was just where I died or if it was how the cinematic worked or whatever, but it literally respawns me right by him and just kind of like right there. And I'm like, fuck. So I had to like get down real quick and go over to the side, but he hears you because you can't move too fast. And it also respawned me really close to glass. If you step on the glass, it alerts him. This happened 8 to 10 times in a row where I'd literally would just die after like literally 5 to 10 seconds of trying to play.
Which is
Until-
weird
hold on.
considering.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Until I respawned one time, and for some reason he was looking the other way. I'm like, huh? Is that how it was supposed to be? I don't know. But so I got through the David fight literally because I think the game was like, you suck, and it just turned him around.
Yeah.
so I could get away. But yeah. And I remember in the original I had issues with that fight too. I don't have exact details, but I remember getting to this fight and just hating my life even more so than hanging upside down.
I just feel like it's weird that
Sucked.
that fight is still bad, considering that like mechanically it's very similar to the Abby Ellie fight in part 2.
Hmm.
When you're playing as
at
Ellie
the
and
end?
Abby's chasing you in
Oh,
the
that's
theater.
right,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
You know,
Because that is a
yeah.
be stealthy, don't get caught. They're chasing. It's just in a much bigger environment.
And I think that does it a lot of favors. Because
Yeah.
when you're doing it here, again, I got to that, like, I was doing the David fight just fine. I mean, yeah, I had a little issue here and there, but that was just because I suck at sneaking for some reason. But
See,
I
something
like
like
I get to a
that.
certain part of the fight, and for some reason, it just like it didn't want me to
Yeah.
go any farther. Like it was like I don't want to say it
Yeah.
was broken because I don't know if it was just me because I suck at games or if it was actually the game.
No.
'Cause it wasn't like he would literally just like spawn to me and kill me immediately, but where it positioned me, it was like okay, this
Yeah.
can't be right, kind of a thing.
But see, something like that, like you're in like a restaurant, right? With David. I'm
Mhm.
trying to. Yeah.
Yeah.
If they redesigned the restaurant to be bigger or have better coverage or whatever, that is something I feel like they very much could do that doesn't affect the story, does not affect the continuity. You could use the same lines. You are just making it's like a quality of life improvement in terms
Sure.
of like the structure of this one level.
Sure, and I'm also curious because if you two had been there, it'd be a different story. But I'm also curious if you guys have any issues with it because again, I want to keep nailing this home. I suck at video games. All right, so it could have for some reason just been me.
I mean,
Because
listen,
with the entire experience of this entire game, that was the only bug-worthy thing that I experienced. And I don't even call it a bug because I don't know for sure if it was just me sucking at that one point. Because it was
Yeah.
literally just like a 5 to 10 second gap where I just felt like either this is wrong or I just don't understand. I may be doing it wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, back. Yeah, I mean back in the day, 2 years ago when I played it, it was like one of those like, oh, this is not like as
As like sound as you'd like it to be.
yeah, and yeah, and not my personal experience, but just the sentiment on the internet, I think echoes kind of a lot of what you're saying. So I think that's just a part of the game that still maybe in the next remake they'll be able to nail that down, and we'll have a much smoother experience with that.
And I think they're like right where it's due because like I remember the first time around playing that upside down moment and this moment with David, and I remember literally almost quitting. So I didn't even come close to that in this remake. So
I'm
I mean,
kind
I
of shocked
guess
nobody laughed at my joke there.
I didn't catch it. I'm bad at jokes. I've been up for
I was really dry with the
14
delivery
hours.
because I was too dry when I said in the next remake.
Oh. Here it is. Let's
Yeah.
bring in the jokes, and none of us caught it. I'm blaming Alec. Alec didn't catch it either. I'm blaming Alec. Right. So the last thing I want to get to is the price. Is there
Mhm.
anything someone wants to bring up before we get to that question? Any last second thing? Because the price will probably that's like the last thing I want to talk about. So
Yeah,
any other aspects you guys want to bring up?
I have like another point of discussion, but it's in lieu with the price, so I'll just
Okay.
save it for there. But yeah.
I mean, you can just start it off if you want, and then we can piggyback off that to the price question.
Okay, yeah. So
Unless sorry, one more thing, Jordan, do you don't have anything else?
As
For the
I'm trying to
price.
think of like something else.
Yes.
I feel like I just had something and it also completely slipped my mind. So
Oh, yes. There is something I want to talk about that's completely unrelated. So I was playing through this game, and so I've only played each part one time. So, um, the way I think about each of those games, like you, how many times have you played part one?
Me?
Yeah,
Once.
or like Last of Us remastered part one, like that story.
yeah,
How many times have you played that?
This the remake or the remaster? I'm confused now.
All versions of the
Just
game.
part one in general.
Okay, just part one. I played the OG when it came. Well, at 2014, and then this one. That's it.
So two
But so
playthroughs
twice,
as well.
technically.
Okay, because I know a lot of people who have played this version, OG remastered part one, like 12 times, whatever, like that. Like their experience with the story, the gameplay is just way different than I guess we all have played it only once or
Equal
going on
times.
2 playthroughs here.
I said this is my third time playing.
Gotcha.
Because I played once
and
before part two, or once back in 2013, 2014 when it originally came out, and then right
Get
before
yourself
part
up.
two. Yep.
yeah.
Mhm.
I've also only ever played each of them once. I played the original run in 2016, then I played the sequel in 2020, and now I'm replaying the first one for the first time.
Gotcha.
Are you
So
getting into the end game things you can alter at the end? Because I forgot that was a thing.
I'm not, but that's actually the thing I was gonna bring up. Not necessarily the extras. I'm like,
Okay.
Ellie can wear a shirt with Sly Cooper on or whatever.
I
But
did
the
that. I equipped that right at the end.
I'm
I'm
sure
never
you
gonna play
did.
this game again, but I bought that damn shirt and I equipped it on Ellie. Hell yeah.
Something I did notice is that there is director's commentary that you can do
Mm.
while you play
Mhm.
through this game. And that I think, and I kind of want to bring this up before we get into price, becomes a very interesting idea where The Last of Us is like, I think, for a lot of people, the game that proved that games can be art in terms of the story that it tells. Like, my mom will never play a
have
video
you
game in her life. What?
not played Battle Tanks 2 Global Assault on
Not yet.
N64?
It's on the backlog, bro. I promise.
Okay.
Like, my mom's not a good example
Art.
because my mom doesn't really watch like fictional things, but like my mom will never in her life play a video game, but she does watch the occasional movie.
Okay.
I could sit her down while I play through The Last of Us and like it would be somewhat believable for my mom to like get attached to the story,
It would be
surprised
digestible
at
for her.
yeah, and she could get moved by it. And so when I hear the director's commentary, I'm kind of thinking like, well, imagine if tomorrow they were like one of the most famous movies of all time. Like, go with any classic franchise or movie you want. It's getting like
Big
a
baddie.
4K re-release with director's commentary. Because they do director's commentary on DVDs all the time, but there is occasionally the movies where you don't get it for like 10, 20 years till after the movie's made, or
Mhm.
never before seen deleted scenes, stuff like that. I do feel like this is in a way like just the collector's edition of it's the DVD's collector's edition of an old game. Not the collector's edition as far as video games go.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which in my if that were the case, that even hurts it with the price point, in my opinion. But before we
Does
get
it?
to that,
Because like
my
when
opinion. But hold on, Brett, did you have something that you wanted to piggyback off before we get to price?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about two things. One
Sure.
was the HBO show coming out next year.
Sure.
Obviously it's not out yet, so we can't go into the show aspect, but
I cannot wait.
just from the perspective of and video games are a little more probably popular and prevalent than books, but I just think of like Game of Thrones. Like, those books were out for like 10, 15 years, very popular, but then the show comes out and it just explodes with that fandom in terms of just more people getting into a more accessible version of that world. And so I am super excited to see how that conversation goes with
like new fans. Is that
new
what you mean?
fans of, because obviously this show is going to be probably a little bit different with the story and just I was talking about it with a friend, like they're probably going to expand on certain parts of the game that you don't really get to see, or just parts of the world. And so fans getting into the story, the world in the show form, and then also jumping into the game who had never played it before.
Sure.
So
I
I'm just
almost, I
excited.
almost I almost wish it wasn't about Joel and Ellie. Honestly, I'm cool with it, and that's a discussion for another time. But like, I almost wish it was just entirely new characters.
It's a whole nother discussion. So I won't get into it, but I'm thinking about it a lot.
See,
Um,
I'm happy that I think I've said this before. Like when video games are being adapted into movies or television shows, I kind of always ask the question, I was like, well, what's the point of an adaptation? With me personally, and I'm going to use Uncharted as an example, just because there is an Uncharted movie, and this isn't me just using this as an excuse to shit on the fact that it's a bad movie, but
bro,
like,
it's so good, bro.
I love that movie. I think it
was so
succeeds.
fun,
so
dude.
I'll just tell you like my general
The
opinion
best
on
7 I've ever watched.
Yeah.
when I want something adapted is it's so easy to rewatch a movie because you literally turn the movie on, you rewatch it. It takes up to like what's the fucking longest movies out there? Maybe 3 to 4 hours if you're watching like like the director's cut of one of the
Right.
Lord of the Wings,
Ah,
Lord of the
ah.
Rings. You know, and it's nice to re-experience a story. If I ever feel like re-experiencing the story of Uncharted 1, I don't always necessarily have like a week to put into that game again, you know? And so I kind of think adaptions are good ways to like have somebody re-experience the story when you're adapting a video game specifically. You're re-experiencing that story, that world in an easier to consume way. Like
Mhm.
I played Injustice 2 this summer, and I hadn't played Injustice 1 way back in like 2014. Fighting games make it easy because there's really no, you know, level building. It's just the fights. I watched like somebody just took all the cutscenes and made it like the Injustice 1 movie on YouTube.
Yeah, that's pretty common where people do that with all cutscenes and cinematics from games.
Yeah. But with video games, you get into like, well, story stuff is said during gameplay sometimes and all that type of stuff. And so I'm happy that the show's about Joel and Ellie. I do wish that on top of the adaptation of the game, that we got like an anthology series that is just telling world stories in this world. And some of them can take place at the very start of the outbreak. Some of them can take place around Joel and Ellie. Some of them can be characters that maybe we know, but are around just for a few minutes, like an episode about Bill, for example.
Sure.
Mhm.
I agree.
Yeah.
I just think I'll have more comments when it
Yeah.
comes out. You know what I mean?
I walk this fine line where I want more stories in The Last of Us just because I want to see the world building that is definitely behind the scenes that we as the audience don't see by playing the mainline games. But I also don't want them to milk the franchise per se.
Sure. You're gonna give this that anthology series. They're gonna call it Factions. Anyway,
Last of Us Factions, the TV show.
exactly. Brett, go on.
And then the other point I want to bring up was just the comparison between part 1 and part 2 for me, because when I played part 1, I was like, oh my gosh, incredible story, loved it, 10 out of 10, all that stuff. And then when I played part 2, at the time, I played it last year. I didn't play it in 2020. I played it in 2021 with the PS5 update, and that was insane. And initially I was like, oh my gosh, like the pacing of this game is just so bad. Like I thought the game ended like 5 times. But I really loved what I really loved what they did with Abby. Obviously the gameplay stuff is just on a whole nother level. Technically, it's like the best console game of all time almost. I mean, this one's better, but like at that time for that system. And so playing through part 1, I'm just like comparing how I feel about part 1 now, and then also how do I feel about part 2 in relation to going through this story and knowing where it ends. And honestly, for me, I it's making me like part 2 more, because initially I was like, oh, I like part 1 way better. I like part 1 way better. I'm gonna play 2 after this, but I'm like, I think I like part 2 more now. Like
I've always liked part 2 more. I was very vocal. Like, and again, my first impression of 1, I was like, like it's fine. It's a game, has a cool twist at the end. But then I played part 2, and I was like, this is fucking video games.
Yeah.
Like this is why I play video games. And it was the glutton for punishment that I love, and the pacing. It was so unique, and the fact that they make Abby my favorite character. It doesn't matter. But
I liked that.
Even with all that,
I liked that the
even with all
pacing
that
was
being said,
bad. If that makes sense, like that is a
It's not bad.
ballsy
yeah,
choice.
there's
It's
so
not
many
bad, but
Reddit
it is a
comments
ballsy
now
choice.
that like
It is a ballsy choice, like to go up to the climax, and rather than have a decline, you fucking stop and you start it over. I just think that's such a ballsy choice, and I think that all things considered, it actually works for the better of the game. I just think that
I agree.
every person playing it through the first time goes through, okay, so this is going to take like 10 minutes. This is going to take, I don't know what you guys thought when it happened. I was like, all right, this is going to be like a 10-minute flashback.
No,
Okay,
no,
this is going to be like a 2-hour flashback.
What, no, because it says Seattle
And then I
Day
woke
One
up-
again, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh shit, they're doing
But
the other
I thought
side
it was
of
going
this.
to be like, I thought it was going to be like small bits and pieces from each day.
like you get like one from day 1, one from day 2, one from day 3.
But like
But-
small snippets from each day. Yeah.
When that moment happened for me, we're getting off topic. When that moment happened to me, I literally went, "No fucking way! I'm not playing this game." And then I played the game, and I fucking love Abby, so it doesn't
Same.
fucking matter.
Same.
They
I had
did
a
it.
fr- had
They
a friend text
did
me.
it. All
A
right.
friend texted me because he played The Last of Us 1 like the month before part 2 came out, like for the first time. Then went straight into 2, and he was like, "I don't want to play as Abby. How dare she?" I'm like, "Listen, you got to see the story out.
thought
You
the
don't
same
have to
thing.
like the story.
I
I told
thought
you,
the same thing.
you do not have to like the story. You don't have to like her, but you need to like give the
Yeah.
story a shot." And he came up to me after work. He's like, "I get it, man. I get it."
Dude, they pull it off in part 2. We're
And
not talking about
so-
part 2, but I do want to pull.
I actually think, sorry to interrupt. I just think that the conversation Brett did by bringing up part 2, I think actually helps me vocalize what I'm feeling about this game, kind of saying like why I'm going back and forth as to if whether or not I think it was a good idea to remake it 1-for-1.
And I'll just say this one
Yeah.
real quick, and then I'll stop talking about this. But like, it just further strengthens the
Completely.
synergy between these two games.
So
Like,
I think that was the goal. It's
Yeah.
very Last of Us Part 2. Sequels tend to do better because like everybody has heard of The Last of Us, and now suddenly there's another one, and so everybody who played it is getting into it, and new people are getting into it. Like if you think about the fact that it was 7 years between games, kids that were not old enough to ever play Last of Us 1 were old enough to play Last of Us 2, and they need to be able to experience that story. If you don't remake it, you're playing a remastered version of a PS3 game. So there is a big disconnect in visual and even to an extent gameplay quality simply because of technological limitations. It's a very justifiable reason that disconnect is there, but sometimes you do want to make the package of like, look, now they're equal. But I think it ends up working to its detriment because you're still getting level design and gameplay mechanics, again, to an extent, from a game that is not of this generation. Does
See,
that make sense?
It
Yeah,
totally
it-
makes sense. I just think that, and again, I'm beating a dead horse here. Because I played the game again, I don't know if this is the case, or played the game before, I don't know if this is the case, but I never felt that way. Like, yes, it felt slightly dated, but I never got to the point where I was like, oof, like, I can't believe I'm doing this again. Like it flowed. I think the tweaks they make in the combat and the movement really pull a lot of weight in terms of your moment to moment gameplay. And I think that's what puts it over the edge. Just like the lighting does a lot of heavy lifting for like the visuals. I think the tweaks they make in
how a
combat
video game
and
in
movement does it.
2022 should look.
I know what you're talking about, like
Yeah.
design, but I'm there's something about the movement in this game where it makes the design almost
Yeah.
better in a way. Like it almost makes it work better. I don't know if that makes any sense. but-
I guess the best way to explain it is by modernizing this game, but not modernizing it 100% of the way, some of the things stick out more than if you were just playing Last of Us Remastered. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
not
I just-
every
I just-
encounter
I just
makes
don't
me go,
agree.
"This is a fucking PS3 game," but on the
Sure.
times when it does happen, it's more obvious.
I just don't think I ever felt it. Like I understand like the corridor moments, but I've already brought up where like in a game when you're in suspenseful moments, I think the corridor moments are like the best way to do that. Like
Yeah.
yeah, so and maybe that's just because I'm familiar with this type of game. That could just be me, I think too. Okay, but yeah, with everything being said and how this is an improvement from the OG in 2013, because duh, like of course, I still think part 2 is like night and day better than this one. But that's just my opinion.
Part
'Cause
2 is
I fawn over part 2. Like
I don't
I am
think
like
it's-
this is the peak of video
Yeah.
games. So
I don't think it's an opinion. I think objectively speaking, part 2 is a better video game. I get why people might prefer the story of part 1 or prefer
Sure.
some choices in part. Like I was listening to Kind of Funny kind of judge them, and Blessing made a good point of he kind of liked the restraint of part 1 as not being violent every single chance it got, or it being almost a little bit more hopeful, or like Last of Us 2 is just so emotionally
Yep.
draining.
Nope. You're totally right,
Like,
and
and
I
I
totally loved it.
and so I get why somebody might like the story of 1 better, but I just think from an objective standpoint, 2 is the better game. And part of
I don't
that
even think
just
it's
is
close.
it's newer, so that it has that as an advantage. I feel like the best way to explain it, even though it's like the reverse order, is like Infinity War versus Endgame, where like everybody's first time walking out of Infinity War is just dread. And like Endgame is like, oh, you went on a roller coaster and you're sad because some heroes left. It's been 4 fucking years. Because like Tony's dead and Cap went to the past, but it's still a more positive note. And so like you're crying happy tears, where like Infinity War, you're only crying sad tears.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved that moment where I didn't know how to feel at the end. Loved it.
Dude, I
I
was
think
numb.
that's the peak of like writing a video game and
I
writing media, like
I
to
I
invoke
finished
a sense
part
of emotion
yeah.
that you can't even comprehend. They fucking did that.
I finished
We're,
part
we're,
2.
we're running long. We're
Yeah.
running long. So I do wanna get to the pricing. I want to get to the pricing and why now. And I think the why now, in my opinion, is just because like I agree with everything you're saying, where it mends the 2 games a lot better and a lot more cohesively. I also think the show's coming. Show is coming, and I think that's the reason why now, in my opinion. That is
Mhm.
literally the only reason it was happening right now, and the other reasons are just like icing on the cake. Like the reason they made this game right now is because of the show coming on HBO. Do you guys agree? Do you guys disagree?
I agree.
Okay. Jordan?
Now that I've gotten my hands on it, I 100% agree that that's the reason. And I don't say that in a cash grabby way.
No, I'm not saying that either. I'm just like
Yeah.
it's strategic. It's smart. Like why not? If you already were like contemplating doing it, now is the time to do it when you have like that show on the way. So $70. What's our thought on that? Because for me, with everything I've said, where I don't think it's a cash grab. I think they put in meticulous amounts of work for like tweaking and aspects and all, and how visually stunning this game is. I don't think it should be $70. Agree or disagree, Jordan?
You know what? I think I'm gonna have to say disagree.
Oh.
Yeah, I think maybe it should have just been. It's one of those things where because I can't take a peek behind the curtain, or if I do, I don't understand what's behind the curtain. I can't actually be the one to say, but until I'm proven otherwise, I think the game maybe just should have been 60.
So you do agree?
Sorry, I disagree that it should be $70.
Okay.
Sorry, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Okay, I was like, he thinks it should be 70. I thought you were gonna say I think it should be 80, and I'm like, fuck this guy. But no, I totally understand that, Brett.
I kind of like they have those like little box charts of like with like for the different performance modes they have the 4K 60, 1440p, 120, all that stuff. Like I think if you've never played this game before, it is absolutely worth $70. I think if you've only played it once or twice, like me, I think it's still absolutely worth $70. If you've played it a bunch of times, it might not be worth $70. So, but yeah, that is an interesting discussion of like what's that value worth to people. But I mean, I think the story is still one of the best in gaming. I still think all the upgrades they did is totally worth it. And so yeah,
I'll never say that the work wasn't put in. That's never what I'm getting at when I say I
no,
don't think
but
it should be
like
just
if you play Last of Us, Last of Us and Last of Us Remastered like 12 times, you probably don't need to just like jump in here again unless you like just love it that much. But if you've never played it before, if you only played it once like I've had, so the story's still kind of a little fresh. I can't recommend that game enough, no matter what the price is. Obviously, a few months now at Black Friday, maybe next year when it's on sale for $40 or whatever, then the
Yeah.
value proposition just gets stronger.
yeah. Considering
Yeah.
it's the same game from the ground up to an extent. I just think with everything I've said, and I stand by everything I've said, where like this is a good video game. It's a better video game than 2013 because I think it pales in comparison to Part 2. But I think just think we had this entire conversation, right? It releases for $50. Icing on the cake would be, and it's only $50. Like that's crazy. Instead of 70, like even though you're saying both you're saying, I can see it being worth 70. You understand why people are like, like you understand the question to
It's
really,
a
is
70. If it was 60, like last gen was, and
Sure.
some games still this gen are 60,
Sure.
that would just be a little more nudging it to like
I think it's an
palatable.
adequate question. That's why I think it's an adequate question. People are like $70 is that a surefire thing at $70? Like I
no
don't I
factions
can't I don't think so.
multiplayer. No factions multiplayer. We kind of talked like
It did have what's it
Left
called?
behind.
It did have that in there.
But that was in remastered. But like no factions multiplayer, no like director's cut. Like, hey, we're remixing the enemy encounters, in like an arcade mode or something like that. Nothing like that. It's just a game. So yeah, you're right.
But in
I think
the future,
it's a warranted.
It's a warranted question. In the future, though, there is almost no reason to ever go back to the PS3 or PS4 remastered version of this game. I think like because it's such a close 1-to-1, like, or basically is 1-to-1. The example I give is like there is never really a reason to play the original Pokemon games when like Fire Red and Leaf Green exist, because they are better in every way without making too many differences like other remakes did.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I still play Pokemon Gold. Like, well, I don't, but I played Pokemon
I'm
Gold every
talking Gen
summer
1.
for like
I'm
10
talking
years.
I'm talking Gen 1. That's different.
Enough.
You're talking Gen 2.
Enough. Yeah, 10 years in a row, I played that the original Pokemon Gold every summer. So, any last closing thoughts? I think it's they succeeded. They got me again. No son of a bitches. Like this is a worthy game. It's worthy of your time. Even if you played it before, if you're a new fan, if you want to experience it in the definitive version, I think it's right for the taking. $70 is where I kind of like, maybe not $70, but like I still think it's worth the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that moment at the beginning of the game, like that moment, it still hits just as hard.
Yeah, I think it hits harder because like I said before,
yeah.
like the weight that's added with how pretty everything is. Like I think that opening smacks, and I'm like, fuck.
It hits harder.
Damn.
Although I don't think Sarah's new model is that good. Listen, I don't
I
mean
disagree.
Listen, I don't mean to make fun of a kid or talk ill of the dead, but she looks like an alien, bro. Like she's got a really big forehead
Kids
and a
look
really
like
tiny
that
chin.
sometimes. Honestly, kids are weird before they hit puberty or when they're hitting puberty. It's like, what the fuck has happened to you? And then they hit puberty and then they get like horns and shit. Like, what the fuck? They
Damn.
grow like a foot in like 2 days. You're like, what the? All right.
No,
cool,
just
chill.
she looked a little weird at points.
No. There was a scene where I'm thinking of literally just one scene where like there's like the moonlight kind of on her face, and I was like, oh, that looks great.
You know what I noticed it the most when I was playing around in photo mode.
Sure.
Which photo mode in this
Never
is
opened that. I probably should have.
Yeah, you could. The thing is, the shortcut isn't available right away. You have to go into settings to turn the shortcut on. Photo mode isn't great. But I'm not a game dev, so I can't speak. It might be because this isn't a fully open world game. They don't let you move the camera around everywhere, but like, I feel like they could have loosened it up a little bit. Because like, I'm trying to, let's say, turn it around at points and just get on Joel's face, and it does not let me get that close.
Mm-hmm.
Everything behind it's just not there. It's like, no, we can't let him see. It's not there.
It's like,
is it loaded?
Compare it to like Spider-Man. And again, I know an open world game inherently lets you move the camera everywhere, but it's always like, you know how Spider-Man has like free and orbit mode for the cameras?
Mm-hmm.
This one only has one mode, and it's like halfway between the two.
Sure. Another half step. You heard it here first. Okay, that's been our review of The Last of Us Part 1 for the PS5. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you liked what you saw. Do the same thing for the Reels, the Shorts, the TikToks, all that fun stuff. So I'm going to wave goodbye to the camera. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.
Subscribe or I'll beat you with a golf club.
Oh my god. Oh!